Stop me if you've heard this before. Play it safe. Money doesn't grow on trees. Just buy a house as soon as you can. Follow your passion, the money will follow. Debt is always bad. These phrases sound harmless, responsible even. They're repeated by parents, teachers, coworkers, financial gurus on TV, and viral posts online. They feel like common sense. They feel safe. They feel true. But here's the uncomfortable reality. Some of the most popular financial advice in the world is quietly sabotaging people's lives. Not because it's evil, not because it's stupid, but because it's outdated, oversimplified, and dangerously misaligned with how modern money actually works. Today, we're exposing the worst financial advice everyone still follows, the kind that sounds wise, spreads fast, and keeps people stuck for decades. And as you listen, you'll probably realize something unsettling. You didn't just hear this advice once, you built your life around it. Let's start with the most celebrated piece of financial advice of all time: play it safe. From a young age, most people are taught that money and safety go together. Safe job, safe salary, safe investments, safe choices. Risk is portrayed as reckless, irresponsible, and something only gamblers or lucky geniuses engage in. So people do what they think is responsible. They avoid uncertainty. They avoid volatility. They avoid discomfort. Here's the problem. In finance, avoiding risk doesn't eliminate risk. It simply trades visible risk for invisible risk. The person who plays it safe by keeping most of their money in cash feels secure until inflation quietly erodes their purchasing power every single year. The person who avoids investing because markets feel scary takes a different risk, the risk of never catching up, the risk of working longer than planned, the risk of depending on systems that may not keep their promises. Playing it safe often means choosing what feels safe now over what's actually safer long term. And your brain loves that trade-off. Immediate emotional comfort beats abstract future security every time. That's why this advice is so sticky. It feels responsible while quietly planting the seeds of future stress. Now let's talk about another classic. Money doesn't buy happiness. This one is usually delivered with a tone of moral superiority, as if wanting more money is somehow shallow or greedy. And yes, money doesn't guarantee happiness, but here's what this advice conveniently ignores. Lack of money reliably creates stress, anxiety, and limitation. When people internalize money doesn't buy happiness, they often unconsciously stop trying to improve their financial situation. They downplay ambition, they tolerate low pay, they avoid negotiating, they stay in unhealthy jobs because at least I'm happy. Except they're not. They're stressed about bills, they avoid checking their bank account, they feel trapped but guilty for wanting more. This advice turns financial struggle into a moral badge of honor, and that's dangerous. Money isn't the goal, it's a tool, and tools don't buy happiness, but they remove friction. They buy options, they buy time, they buy the ability to say no. They buy distance from stressors that destroy mental health. Telling people money doesn't buy happiness without context is like telling someone oxygen doesn't buy happiness. True in theory, completely unhelpful in practice. Next up, just buy a house as soon as you can. This advice has been repeated so often it's practically a rite of passage. Rent is throwing money away, home ownership is the ultimate financial milestone. If you don't buy early, you're falling behind. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Buying a house too early, in the wrong location, with the wrong finances, can be one of the most expensive mistakes of a lifetime. A house is not just an asset, it's a massive illiquid commitment. Property taxes, maintenance, insurance, repairs, interest, opportunity cost. These are rarely mentioned in the fairy tale version of home ownership. For many people, buying early locks them into a job they hate, a city they've outgrown, and a lifestyle that prevents them from taking risks. The house becomes golden handcuffs, and ironically, the very thing that was supposed to provide security ends up limiting growth. Renting isn't throwing money away if it buys flexibility, mobility, and freedom. Sometimes renting is the strategic choice, but bad advice turns it into a moral failure. Now let's hit one of the most damaging pieces of advice ever given to an entire generation. Follow your passion and the money will follow. This sounds inspiring. It sounds empowering. It sounds like something a successful person says after they've made it. But as advice, it's incomplete at best and reckless at worst. Passion does not automatically translate into market demand. Loving something doesn't mean people will pay for it, and telling young people to ignore economics, skills, leverage, and timing sets them up for disappointment and debt. A healthier version of this advice would be build valuable skills, then use the income and leverage to fund your passions. But that doesn't sound as romantic, so it doesn't spread. Following your passion without a strategy often leads to low pay, burnout, and resentment, especially when you're told that struggling is proof you're doing what you love. Let's talk about debt is always bad. This advice sounds responsible, and for many people it comes from a place of genuine care. But like most blanket financial advice, it ignores nuance. There is destructive debt, high-interest consumer debt used to fund consumption without income growth. That kind of debt deserves caution. But there is also strategic debt, education that increases earning potential, business investments, real estate leverage, tools that produce more value than they cost. When people fear all debt equally, they often avoid opportunities that could significantly improve their financial future. They pay everything in cash, drain savings, avoid investing in themselves, and pride themselves on being debt-free while still being asset-poor. The goal isn't zero debt, the goal is intelligent leverage. But fear-based advice doesn't teach judgment, it teaches avoidance. Now let's examine you just need to budget better. This advice is often thrown at people who are struggling financially, as if the problem is a lack of discipline rather than a lack of income. Budgeting is useful, awareness matters, but budgeting cannot solve a structural income problem. You cannot spreadsheet your way out of poverty. You cannot optimize expenses forever. At some point, the focus must shift from controlling pennies to increasing earning power. Bad financial advice keeps people stuck in scarcity mode, obsessing over small cuts instead of building skills, negotiating pay, or creating new income streams. It makes people feel responsible for systemic constraints, which leads to shame instead of strategy. Now let's hit another classic. You should already have it figured out by now. This isn't explicit advice, it's cultural pressure. By a certain age, you're supposed to be settled, stable, and confident. This pressure leads people to lock in decisions too early, careers, houses, lifestyles they haven't fully tested. Financial regret often comes not from bad decisions, but from rushed decisions made to meet expectations. Good advice encourages exploration. Bad advice demands certainty before clarity exists. Here's another one that sounds smart, but causes real harm. Trust the experts. Experts can be useful, but outsourcing thinking entirely is dangerous. Financial advisors, influencers, analysts all have incentives, biases, and blind spots. When people stop learning and start deferring, they lose agency. They follow advice they don't understand, then panic when outcomes differ from expectations. The goal isn't to distrust experts, it's to understand enough to evaluate advice critically. Let's zoom out for a moment. Why does bad financial advice spread so easily? Because it feels good. It reduces anxiety. It simplifies complexity. It offers certainty in an uncertain world. Your brain loves that. Good financial advice often feels uncomfortable. It asks you to delay gratification, to tolerate uncertainty, to question identity-level beliefs, to admit you might be wrong. Bad advice feels reassuring in the moment, even if it costs you years later. Here's the most dangerous part. Most bad financial advice isn't obviously wrong. It's context-dependent. It might have worked in a different economy, a different era, or a different life stage. But blindly applying it today, without questioning assumptions, is how people get stuck. The world has changed. Markets are faster, careers are less linear, lifespans are longer, inflation is real. Stability looks different now. Yet, people are still following advice designed for a world that no longer exists. So, what's the alternative? It's not memorizing new rules, it's developing better judgment, asking better questions, understanding trade-offs instead of chasing certainty. Instead of, is this safe? Ask, what risk am I taking if I don't do this? Instead of, is this guaranteed? Ask, what's the downside and can I survive it? Instead of, what should I do? Ask, what problem am I actually trying to solve? Your financial future won't be determined by one decision. It will be shaped by thousands of small choices, guided by the advice you believe without questioning. And the most dangerous advice of all? Everyone does it this way. Because when everyone is comfortable, opportunity usually hides somewhere else. If any of these ideas made you uncomfortable, that's not a bad sign. That's awareness. That's the moment bad advice starts losing its grip. And that's exactly where better financial decisions begin.